Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to the Off-Grid Garage here in super sunny Australia. It is not hot anymore. We're in the middle of autumn, but we still have 35 amps outside. Beautiful. In today's video, we want to have a look at the JK-BMS and how it works, how it operates with multiple batteries in parallel, and how it keeps your system safe. Yeah, this is one of the main purposes of a BMS, keeping everything safe. And we haven't done such a video for quite a while. It was probably 2-3 years back when the JK-Inverter BMS came out and we explored how the communication works between multiple parallel batteries. But now, after so many firmware updates, it is time to look at this again. At the end of the video, we also want to have a look if it is necessary to have communication at all, or if you can charge your batteries without communication. Yeah, some people do, some people don't. So let's see what we can find out together. Let me show you the test setup here. We've got a Raspberry Pi here running the Venus OS, yeah, but this is not in relation to Victron, anything. This is my inverter, basically, yeah. We've got a CAN communication dongle plugged in, and this all plugs into a JK-Inverter BMS here to the CAN port. There you can see it. And here, as a test scenario, we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 batteries in parallel. This battery here is the master, slave number 1, slave number 2, slave number 3, yeah? And this is pretty much a very typical scenario. You've got 4 batteries here from Global Power, Yixiyang, EEL, Seplos, or any other company. You have put them all in parallel, and now you want to connect these 4 batteries to your inverter. I think 3-4 batteries is pretty standard these days. Well, back in the day when we built the battery shelf here, this was actually a huge capacity I built. Most of the users out there, they had only 1 battery, some had 2 batteries already, and I built a battery shelf with 3 batteries. So 44 kilowatt hours here. Now these days with 4 batteries you get about 60 kilowatt hours, which is a fantastic size. And such a setup is actually not expensive anymore because prices of batteries have come down so much. And with all these do-it-yourself cases on the market now, you can build your own battery very quickly, very safely. And this is still the cheapest way to get your own battery. I've just logged into one of these 4 Global Power batteries here, and let's have a quick look at the settings here. So everything is on default, on standard. You can find all my settings on my website. The link is down below as well. I'm still getting a lot of emails where people ask for the correct settings. I can only make a recommendation how I set up my system here as per the test results we have done in the past with lithium iron phosphate batteries. And these settings are working pretty well, so they should work for you too. So what I have done for all these 4 batteries, I have set the continued charge current to 100 amps and the continued discharge current to 100 amps as well. Yeah, we are charging to 3.45 volts. Is that important? Yeah, 3.45 volts. This is the RCV, the requested charge voltage here in the BMS. And I think this is pretty much all the information we need. Okay, so now I'm logged into the Victron remote console. We will have a look under devices, and we can see the JK-BMS already here with the state of charge, the average voltage across all the 4 batteries connected, and the current. This battery is not connected, it's not a live active battery at the moment, so we will see no current going in and out. Let's have a look inside here. What's going on? State of health 100%, battery temperature 22 degrees. So here, if you go into details, we can see the lowest and highest cell voltage as well as the minimum and maximum cell temperature. And here on the right, it also tells you the module and the cell number of your lowest cell voltage. So 00 means this is the master BMS, yeah, all dip switches are on 0, and you can see the highest cell voltage is in module number 1, cell number 2, minimum temperature in module number 3, and maximum temperature is in the master again. We've got 4 modules online, everything is okay, nothing is offline. None of the batteries is blocking the charging and discharging, and we have an installed capacity of 1178 ampere hours. We have 582 ampere hours available. So perfect, this is all good. These information are coming from the master BMS as well. It collects all the information of the connected batteries. Of course, at the moment we have no alarms. These are the charge parameters the BMS, the batteries, are requesting from your inverter. Yeah, we have set a 3.45 as our RCV. This times 16, we've got 16 cells in each of the batteries, is 55.2 volts. That means your inverter will only charge to 55.2 volts, not any higher. And because we have 4 batteries connected and we have set 100 amps of continued charge current in the BMS, we've got a requested charge current limit, CCL, of 320 amps. So why not 400? Yeah, 100 amps per BMS per battery times 4, because the JK-Inverter BMS takes 20% off whatever you are setting here in the app. So 100 amps minus 20% is 80 amps. So it requests only 80 amps per BMS. And 80 amps times 4 is 320. It does a similar thing for the DCL, the discharge current limit. This is the continued discharge current setting in your app, which sits on 100 amps as well. So 4 times 100 is 400. But here again, it takes away 15%. And the BMS does this to allow for spikes. If we would set 400 amps as a continued charge current here, and you have larger loads coming on and off, you have cloudy weather, sun comes out, clouds in a mix, you always go a bit over and under. We would constantly see a disconnect of some of the BMS then because you're over these 100 amps, which you have set as a hard limit, as a threshold in your app. So that's why the JK-Inverter BMS takes 20% off of that, or 15% for the DCL, the discharge limit. So that is all good. This would be the maximum charge we're requesting, 320 amps. Yeah, and these are pretty much the most important parameters the BMS requests or sends to your inverter. You may not be able to see all these details in your inverter itself, but it gets all these details as shown here in the Victron system. So for example, your inverter may not show the lowest and highest cell voltage or the lowest and highest temperatures, how many battery modules are online. But internally, it works with this information, as we will see right now. All right, this is our start point. Everything is okay. There's no alarm. All 4 modules are online. We are ready to charge with 320 amps into these 4 batteries. So now, as I said initially, the main purpose of your BMS is to keep the battery safe, to keep you safe. So whenever something goes wrong, it should tell your inverter, and then the inverter shuts off or throttles down or whatever. So and this is exactly what we want to explore today. So I want to do a couple of tests and see how the JK-Inverter BMS reacts to different faults we are applying to the system. So the first one would be, so let's see what damage we can do here. We are on 3.288 volts. So if I set the cell over voltage protection to 3.28 volts, you should actually see an alarm and the BMS turning off. Yeah, so let's try this. Go into settings, type in 6 times 1 for the password. And let's go down and see here, cell over voltage protection. Unfortunately, we cannot only set this one here to 3.28 volts. If I would press OK, it says sending failure because some of the other values in here, the parameters, they need to be set accordingly. Yeah, the cell requested charge voltage, for example, needs to be lower than the over voltage protection. So we can set this one here to 279, for example. Yeah, 1 millivolt lower than the over voltage protection. And the same for the state of charge 100% reset voltage needs to be lower than the RCV. So 278. And then the recovery needs to be even lower. So 277, that's it. Yeah, now we've got them in the correct order and we can start from the bottom to accept them. You say okay, 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 okay. So now we should see an alarm after a couple of seconds. Battery is fully charged because we have reached the 3.28 volts. And you can see up here the charge MOSFET has turned off. So this BMS is now protecting your battery and keeps it safe. At the same time, you can see here in the Victron system or on your inverter, we've got a JK-BMS alarm high cell voltage. Yeah, the master BMS has recognized, hey, there's something wrong with my slave number 3 and is reporting this all now to the inverter. Yeah, we still have 4 modules online. The BMS is still responding and everything, but you can see now here one of the modules is actually blocking charging. Yeah, this is our battery number 4, slave number 3. And let's have a look what's going on here in alarms. We have a warning here, high cell voltage warning. It is not an alarm as such. So Victron and your inverter will distinguish between warnings and alarms. Warning is just the first step. Yeah, something in your system is wrong, but it is not severe. At this moment, we've got an overvoltage protection. The BMS has correctly messaged this to the master BMS, and it is reporting a warning to your inverter. To see an alarm here, all 4 of the BMSs, all of the connected BMSs needs to have an overvoltage protection. So none of the BMS and batteries is actually operational, and then you will see an alarm and the whole system shuts down. But as long as one BMS is still active and not in a warning or alarm state, the JK-Inverter BMS, if we scroll a bit further down and go to parameters, is still requesting a charge voltage of 55.2 volts, but you can also see now the requested charge voltage has now reduced from 340 amps, I think, to only 240 amps. Yeah, it has taken away 100 amps of the faulty BMS. That is of course total nonsense, because we had 320 amps requested before and now we have 240 amps only. So it has only detected 80 amps, not 100. We have set 100 amps as a hard limit in the app, but it calculates only with 80 amps because of the 20% it leaves for spikes. So 80 amps less than before. And of course the discharge current has not changed here, because even this battery number 4 with the fault can still discharge. Yeah, as you can see up here, the discharge MOSFETs are still on. So if I connect the load now to these 4 batteries, this battery with the alarm will still discharge. So that's why we don't see a reduction in DCL. If we would have an under voltage protection, a cell low voltage alarm, this would then mean we cannot discharge our battery any further, and we would see a reduction in requested discharge current for your inverter. That means your inverter takes less energy from your batteries and more energy from the grid if necessary. If you are off-grid and don't have a grid as a second energy source, it will ignore the DCL altogether as long as the DCL is over 0 amps basically. As long as there's 1 amp requested, it takes whatever it can from the batteries because there's no other energy source. So this works all very well, and we can also see our Google Tower stack here, and the bottom battery has an alarm there. So you also have a visual indication that something is wrong with this battery. Okay, I've now changed the settings again in the BMS, and we can see we have now the correct charge current again, the CCL. The charge MOSFETs have turned on in the BMS again, and we can charge with full power of 320 amps. So as soon as the fault clears in the BMS, the master BMS requests the full CCL and DCL again from the inverter. Okay, let me see if I can trigger an over voltage, an over temperature situation here with one of the batteries. But I don't think I'm able to, because the maximum is 22.1 in this battery. Charge over temperature protection, the recovery. We set this one to 20, but I don't think. No, the lowest is 30 we can set. Okay, let's try something else. They have used silicon glue here to put the temperature sensors on top of the cell, so I cannot really heat them up. Ah, hang on. Yes, we can. With our Miss Piggy. You should see T1. Yep, T1 is rising. Okay, that's temperature sensor number 1. Perfect. So we just need to set the limit correctly, and then we can trigger an over temperature warning. I'm just not sure if this actually reacts to it, because this is a charge over temperature warning 30. Okay, and the over temperature protection to say 40. Okay, and then we go back in the BMS and see what we can trigger. There is protection charge over temperature protection alarm, whatever it's called. You can see the charge MOSFETs have turned off again. And here in the Victron we can see the JK-BMS high charge temperature. Again, one BMS is missing in the list of 4, so we have reduced the charge current to only 240 amps from 320. Charge MOSFETs have turned off, so nothing is going into this battery anymore, but we are still able to discharge this battery, of course. And if you have a look here under details, we can see 4 batteries are online, everything is there, but 1 is blocking the charging. Yeah, we can also see here the maximum cell temperature is now our temperature sensor number 1 in the master battery. This is exactly what we have just heated up with Miss Piggy. It is now at 29 degrees, so it should clear actually under 30 degrees. Yes, the BMS has already cleared, and it did. Look at this. Nothing is blocking anymore. The alarm is sticky here. I need to acknowledge this one manually. But here under parameters, we should also be back at 320 full power charging again. I'll just heat it up again and you can watch the screen here. I believe this should be enough to trigger an alarm. You're at 40.9. Yep, there's the alarm. And there's the alarm in Victron or your inverter. And reduced charge current, 240 amps. So perfect. This keeps everything safe. Nice. Okay, while we have this battery open there, we probably can trigger a overcurrent protection as well, because here it is a bit tricky. If you go into the controls of your BMS, you have the ability to set the, it's called parallel limiter now. It's a current limiter. Yeah, and you can either disable it or enable it. It is enabled at the moment, and that means that if we go over 100 amps with this BMS here for 3 seconds, it would activate this current limiter and then reduce the current into this BMS to 10 amps only. Yeah, from 100 amps or over 100 amps down to 10 amps. I don't want to use 100 amps. Let's 15 amps. This will obviously change our CCL here as well, because the master now realizes we've got 3 batteries sitting on 100 amps and only 1 battery is sitting on 15 amps. And it sums this all together and then takes 20% off basically. Okay, let me set something up to put a bit of current into this battery and then we can start the test. Okay, so change this one down to 55.2. Doesn't really matter. Okay, what I have done now, I've used the adjustable power supply here, set this one to 55.2 volts. This is what the BMS would request from your inverter, and set it to 10 amps, yeah? We are not charging at the moment, and I've connected this power supply to the negative terminal. From there, it goes into the BMS and through the BMS to the battery. And then here the positive goes directly to the battery. So we are actually going through the BMS with this power supply. So when I turn this on here, we're obviously charging now with 10 amps into this battery. And here the BMS in the app shows us also 11 amps going in, yeah? So there's no problem at the moment, but we have set the maximum charge current for this BMS to 15 amps, yeah? What we are going to do now is we are disabling the parallel limiter. That means when we hit the 15 amps maximum charge current for 3 seconds, yep, there it is, 15 amps, continued charge current for 3 seconds. Then we will go into alarm or warning for 60 seconds. Yeah, that means the charge over current protection recovery timer sits on 60 seconds. Yeah, for this 60 seconds, it will stop charging this battery. We've got an overcurrent. It turns off the MOSFETs and also sends an alarm here to the system, obviously. So let's give this a go. Change this here to, say, 18 amps. 1, 2, 3 seconds. And we should see here a protection charge over current. And we have the same here in the inverter, JK-BMS high charge current. The CCL, the requested charge voltage, has reduced to 240 amps only. So that is all working perfectly fine. You can also see in the app here, there's a timer running now. Yeah, these are our 60 seconds we have set in the app. And another 20 seconds, the BMS will turn off this alarm and tries again how much current is actually coming into the battery. If it is still over 15 amps, our threshold we have set, it will go into alarm again. And it will continue doing this, yeah? Here we go. 20 amps going in. This is over 15 again. So now again, the timer runs for 1 minute and then it tries again and again and again. And I think it tries it a couple of times only before it actually totally resets and then stops charging altogether. And I think it goes into an alarm then, and then you have to reset the BMS manually. And now the alarm clears again. We can see the CCL goes up again. Everything is good. Now the next alarm comes because after 3 seconds it realizes the charge count is still too high. So we're going back into alarm. Okay, so now let me turn on this parallel limiter. Yeah. Bam. So let's give it another 15 seconds until the alarm clears. We still have a reduced charge current at the moment. 1 second. Now the alarm clears. The CCL should now increase to 320 amps. No, it doesn't, because we've got another alarm, right? MOSFETs have turned off. We've got an alarm. We are charging with a reduced current of 240 amps as usual, but the parallel limiter, the current limiter, now allows 10 amps going into the battery still. Yeah, this is the difference to before. There was 0 amps going into the battery, but now we are allowing 10, 11 amps into the battery. So this parallel limiter is actually bypassing the MOSFETs and is charging the battery with a very small current. So now let's wait another 20 seconds until this fault clears here and see what happens with the current limiter active. So 7, 6, 5. What is going to happen? And what can we see with the CCL? Is it requesting more current again? So the alarm has now cleared in the BMS. Charge MOSFETs are still off. And we can still see now we have a reduced charge current limit requested from your inverter. And this battery with the overcurrent fault is still charging with 10 amps. Yeah. And you can see now the difference. We are not going back to an alarm after 3 seconds as we did without the current limiter. And we are also not increasing the CCL again to 320. So if you have the current limiter active and it actually triggers with an overcurrent protection at some stage, it will stay active until the current goes under, oh, no quote me, 5 amps, I think. Yeah, but this battery had a fault before and it is not part of your system anymore. Yeah, we are charging reduced. Only 3 batteries are getting their 80 amps, which we have set. But this battery here is not part of the game anymore. Even it takes 11 amps. We will not see a full charge current limit again until we go under 5 amps. So let's see if this works actually. I think it was 5 amps. Set the current to 6 amps. You can see here on the left the parallel limiter, the charge limiter is on. So 6 amps doesn't do anything. We go one further down to 5 amps. It's 5.2 the BMS shows. And we go one further down to 4 amps. And now the parallel limiter turns off, so it is actually 5 amps. And now we should also see the CCL increasing again because the fault has cleared. So the CCL should go up to 320 amps. In this case it doesn't, because we have changed the charge current here in the BMS to only 15 amps. So 252 is the maximum for this setup at the moment, for this test setup. Yeah. But usually you have 100 amps and go over 100 amps and then it reduces it to 10 amps only. And this fault is then sticky until you go under 5 amps with this particular BMS. And only this clears then the fault and gives you back the full charge current limit. Okay, so as we have seen, this all works perfectly fine, yeah? Over voltage protection, over current protection, over temperature protection, different BMSs, even when the master has an overcurrent, it still maintains the slaves connected and reports all these numbers correctly to your inverter. So everything here is safe, and it would do the exact same for the under voltage, under temperature protections as well. I just cannot demonstrate it right now because the batteries are half full, and I would need to empty all 4 batteries first to get to the lower voltages to do the same testing again. But we have tested this in the past, and I usually test this as well when my batteries are empty. So I go a little bit further and see if the BMS actually turns off and reports this all correctly, and I can tell you it does. So there's now one part which I'm not so happy with at the moment. I have discussed this with G-Kong already and they think it is fine. I want to show you and get your opinion on that. So what we have at the moment here is... So I've now changed the maximum charge current in this BMS back to 100 amps from 15 to 100. And you can see here all 4 modules are online. Nothing is blocking, charging or discharging. And we should also see here the full requested charge current of 320 amps and 340 discharge. So everything is back to normal as it was before. 4 batteries are online. Yeah. So now there could be another fault. So far we have tested internal faults with the cells, over voltage, over current, over temperature stuff. There could be something else happening to your system. Yeah, you've got this stack of 4 batteries and now you have a fault in the cable. Someone unplugs one of the cables accidentally. One BMS goes missing. Oh, what you can see here already in the Victron remote console is now the master BMS says now, well, there are 3 batteries online. Yeah. Nothing is blocking, there's not even an alarm coming up or something. And when we have a look at the parameters, it still charges to 55.2 volts, but it reduces the maximum charge current to 240, which will come from your inverter. So from 320 to 240, again, 80 amps are missing because one BMS is missing, but there's no alarm. Yeah. So while this is kind of correct what JK is doing here, we could also have the situation now that we have a stale BMS. The BMS is not unplugged from the rest, but it is not communicating anymore. It is not responding anymore. It is stale, issue with the firmware. It is just hanging, not responding anymore, not communicating anymore. But it is still connected and it is still charging. But the master BMS or your inverter does not know anything about it. So we are charging up our system now a little bit slower than before, but we don't get an alarm, so we are not getting notified. And now in this battery, which has a faulty BMS, a stale BMS, we are still charging it because the charge MOSFETs are still on. And now we get a cell over voltage alarm protection, and the BMS is not catching it. Yeah, because the master BMS thinks we have only 3 batteries connected because it can communicate with these 3 BMSs, but not with the 4th one anymore. But exactly in this battery, we have a problem with one of the cells. We've got an overcurrent, we've got an over temperature, and nothing would be reported to the master BMS anymore. So this could potentially lead to a little disaster. You are overcharging your battery over 3.65 volts and nobody will know about it. Yeah, and this is even worse if we unplug, for example, 3 of the 4 batteries. So the master is now alone and it reports 80 amps to your inverter, of course, yeah, because it sees, well, there's only one BMS connected, so everything is safe. You had a lightning strike somewhere in your neighborhood or something, there was a surge, and 3 of your BMSs are grilled. But these 3 batteries are still physically connected to your system and are still charging. Yeah, they are not being monitored anymore by the BMS. The BMS is not reacting to an over voltage protection anymore, an over temperature, over current, whatever you name it. The master doesn't know about it and doesn't send you a notification, a warning anymore. Everything is clear. You've got only one BMS connected. So as you can see, this external cabling issue or the communication heartbeat of one of the BMSs or multiple of these BMSs is not being captured by the master BMS here. On the other hand, if the master BMS fails, if the master BMS stops communicating to your inverter, the inverter will realize this at some stage and stops charging and discharging the battery altogether. It will set DCL and CCL to 0 because it doesn't know anything about the battery anymore. It loses communication to the master, it will stop. But if the master stays online, but one or more of your other BMSs fail for whatever reason, there's nothing. Yeah, no warning, nothing. It reduces the current, which is kind of safe, but I think it is not safe enough. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about this, yeah? To mitigate this problem, well, at least if you have a Victron system, I have made this very basic Node-RED workflow. And I want to thank Ralf from Germany very, very much for all his emails he sent me. He basically set me on the path of Node-RED and gave me some examples what he has programmed with Node-RED. And I started slowly getting my way into Node-RED, and it is truly amazing what you can do. how you can control and manipulate your charging, discharging behavior. So you can see it's a very, very simple workflow. What it basically does, it checks how many batteries are connected for. It has this BMS module watchdog, what I have called it. And here at the end, you can see BMS failure. This is my alarm code I'm sending to the Victron system. And it says 0, so there's no alarm at the moment. And DVCC, the max charge current, so the CCL, is set to -1, which basically turns it off. Settings, DVCC, over here. Yeah, there's no limit. I'm not doing any limits here. So then let's go ahead and disconnect one of the BMSs. So here in the workflow, we should see now on the left-hand side the number 4 going to number 3, just over here. It does it now. And you can see now here the BMS failure has now changed from 0 to 1. And the maximum charge current is now 0. That means 0 amps. So if you have a look here in the Victron system again, first of all, we get an alarm now. One BMS has dropped out, we get an alarm. So it says JK internal failure. Yeah? Something is wrong with the whole stack of BMSs you had. We don't know if it's just a cable alarm or really one of the BMSs is faulty. We don't know. And you can also see the limit charge current is now turned on and the maximum charge current is 0. So if we go back to the JK-BMS, go in here, go into details. The JK-BMS itself still says we have 3 batteries online, nothing is blocking us, so we keep charging, right? Let me silence this alarm. And here under parameters, again, the JK-BMS would charge now, requests a charge current of 240 amps from your inverter, which is not correct. Yeah, something has happened to battery or BMS number 4 and there's no alarm, we still keep charging. But I've overwritten this now with the CCL on 0 amps. There it is, 0 amps. I've also integrated a reset BMS watchdog, which I can press at any time if I have intentionally removed one of the BMSs. Like now, BMS 4 is out because it goes to maintenance or I don't need it anymore. I'm running the whole show with 3 BMSs. I press the button and the 3 BMS will now be my baseline. Yeah, alarm will clear and we're charging with 240 amps. If I lose another BMS or another 2 BMS or something, this whole setup here will trigger again, disables charging altogether and says, ho, something is wrong. We are setting the charge current to 0. So if I plug in the cable again, if it's only a temporary issue, and I plug in the cable again, the BMS starts responding again, which could happen if I replace the cables with longer ones with different colors or something. I temporarily only disconnect the BMS. You can see we've got now 4 BMS online again, back to where it was. The BMS failure is on 0 and the DVCC is on -1, which is turned off. So here we are back to 320 amps, 4 BMS times 80. Here it is turned off again, no charge limit. So this is actually a pretty cool little extension, which is running all the time on the Servo GX in the Victron system. So if you have a Victron system as well and are interested in this one, I will link this down below. It links to my website and there you can find the JSON code for it, which you can just copy and you go in under these 3 dots and go to import and paste this code into this window and import it. And this will then create a new workflow in your Node-RED with my code and you can see how it works and can adapt it to your system and can even develop it further. So I link this all down below. Only interesting for people with Victron systems if you want this extra functionality, this extra safety, and monitor your cables as well. So and now we probably have the discussion about having your batteries connected to the inverter, let it control the charge current and charge voltage, or don't have any communication between your battery and your inverter and set everything up in your charger. And this is probably a discussion older than I am. It is like Apple and Android, BMW and Mercedes, Ernie or Bert. Yeah, you cannot like both. You need to make your decision in life which way you go. Yeah, so are we going with communication or without communication? At the moment I don't have any communication here in my production system. I've got the battery shelf here, and all the charge settings are in the MPPTs and in the Multi-Plus, and they charge accordingly to 55.2 volts, then do an absorption phase, and then fall back to float voltage. And there's no communication between these batteries and these chargers. And this bit me back a couple of years ago already, when one of the batteries, I think it was the middle one here as well with the JK-Inverter BMS, they come with two temperature sensors. You can see them there and there. And I have one put in between the batteries, and the other one sits in the back side of the circuit breaker. And during summer I have charged here with 15 kilowatts or something into these batteries. This was like 270 amps, and the circuit breaker got pretty warm. So it triggered an over voltage protection for one of these batteries here. BMS turned off, and these 270 amps then split into two and went into these two batteries, just to create an overcurrent protection in each of these batteries, and eventually the whole system shut down, of course, while I was not home. But now I'm still running this with no communication. I'm testing the other batteries here with different systems to monitor, to control, to probably make it a bit safer or so, but I'm not sure. Is it necessary to have communication or not? Let's find out. And I'm sure you will read these comments down under the video, that Luigi from Italy says, I've got the BMS running for 20 years without communication and house is not burned. Well, glad to hear, Luigi, that your house has not burned down yet without communication. And please keep it like this. And probably people will also think, well, I've got only a small system, so communication is not too important for me. It is more of something for larger system, more advanced. So what I've created here for you, the link is down below, is a little spreadsheet where you can simulate if communication is useful or useless, or if it makes sense from a safety perspective, if you want it or if you don't need it. Something like this, It is called BMS with and without inverter communication. So what it consists of, BMS 1 to 16. You can see I've got only one BMS activated at the moment here with this drop-down menu. And this BMS has a charge current of 100 amps. You can change this as well if you want to. And up here I can put in my PV peak power. So let's put in a small solar system of 5 kilowatt. And this at 55 volts, maximum charge current, maximum battery voltage, is around 91 amps, So I have set 100 amps in the BMS, but the JK BMS realizes only 80 amps, It takes these 20% off just to allow for spikes if you connect or disconnect loads, or if the sun comes back behind a cloud or something then. So the BMS would now report these 80 amps to the inverter, With communication, we've got a maximum charge current of 80 amps. Even my system can do 91 amps maximum, but it is reduced, throttled down to 80 amps only. Without communication, we will get the full 91 amps because there's no communication between your BMS and the inverter will just deliver whatever the sun shines outside. Maximum power, 91 amps. Still, it is in the safe path because you have set 100 amps of maximum charge current in your BMS. So how do you choose the correct charge current in your BMS here? Well, this depends solely on the fuse you have on the circuit breaker and also, of course, on the cabling you are using to connect your battery. So you need to set your charge current, your maximum charge current in the BMS for each of your batteries accordingly to the cable dimensions and also the size of your circuit breaker and or fuse. So here in this example, no issues with or without communication, right? So let's introduce a second BMS now. We say this one has no fault. And we still have the 5 kilowatt system, 91 amps. And now the master BMS sees two BMSs, 80 amps, and reports, well, you can charge me with 160 amps. But of course, your solar system can only deliver 91 amps. And these are splitting up into 45 amps into each of the batteries. And this would be exactly 100% the same without communication, 45 amps into each of the batteries. This is the maximum your solar system can, and it is safe to do because you have set 100 amps. So no issue there. So let's have a look at the system, what we have tested right now, 4 batteries, each of them sits at 100 amps. We can see here the CCL what is reported to the inverter, requested 320 amps. Yeah, that's what we have seen in the Victron system all the time. So we tell the inverter, charge me with 320 amps. Your solar system can do only 91 amps. That would mean 23 amps in each of these 4 batteries. No problem at all, with communication, without communication. So let's see, one of the BMSs has now a fault. Yeah, exactly what we have tested before. Over voltage protection. You've got a runner at 55 volts. One of your cells has hit 3.65 volts. We've got a fault. Bam. Your BMS goes out. Red line. The master sees 0 amps coming from this BMS. The charge current into this BMS is 0 amps because the MOSFETs have turned off, right? There's a physical disconnection between your charger and the BMS, if the BMS works. The master would now report, okay, charge me with 240 amps only. Yeah, because your system still can do only 90 amps. It would be 30 amps into the system. Exactly the same as without communication. If one of your BMSs has a fault, it would be no difference. Everything is safe. We are still far under these 100 amps here. No issues at all with or without communication. The only difference is you don't get a notification. So if this happens on a regular base, without communication, you would not know. If you don't have any other monitoring system like home assistant set up or anything else set up, you would not know. I did not know about my system here regularly disconnecting because of this temperature issue with the breaker. So this one BMS regularly turned off, and I didn't know about this because the other 2 BMSs were still online and charging, discharging. I just didn't know. Okay, let's clear the fault. And with such a system here, 15 kilowatt hours per battery times 4 makes around 60 kilowatt hours of storage. Very good storage system there. You probably have a larger solar system as well to actually charge it, right? So let's double this to 10 kilowatt. 10 kilowatt is not a big system these days anymore. So we are now having 182 amps coming from your solar system into these batteries. Yeah, everything is green, no issues at all. We are requesting 320. Your solar system can do only 182 amps. No problem. We're getting 45 amps into each of the batteries, the same as with the without the communications. Yeah. So let's do another fault here in one of the other batteries. Bang. Fault, 1 trips out. Master BMS requests only 240 amps now, but we are still charging with only 180 amps from your solar system. No problems. 61 amps into the remaining batteries now. Yeah, that's 182 amps divided by 3 remaining batteries. 61 amps, still far under 100 amps. Same with communication, without communication. Now you've got another temperature issue in one of the other BMSs. One of them trips out again. Yeah. So here again, we've got 2 remaining BMSs, 80 amps each. We are requesting 160 amps from your inverter. The inverter can deliver 182 amps. So we got a bit of throttling here with the communication already, down to 80 amps. Very, very safe. Yeah. We don't have any throttling without the communication because the charger doesn't know that 2 BMSs have failed. So we are charging 182 amps into the remaining 2 batteries. The red ones are turned off basically. 91 amps, everything is safe. So now you can already see where this leads to. Because if you have a larger system like 15 kilowatt, what I have here, and I had only 3 batteries online. So let's do this. What happened to me? And I have no communication. So I'm charging with 273 amps into the system here. 91 amps into each of the batteries. Still okay. We are under 100 amps. But now one of the batteries goes into a fault because middle shelf battery has this over temperature protection now. Bam. Yeah. And you can see what happens now. This one trips out and your 273 amps coming in are now divided between the 2 remaining batteries, and you're getting 136 amps into these 2 batteries each. We have set 100 amps as the maximum charge current in your BMS. So you will trigger an overcurrent protection in these 2 BMSs. So one of them will trip first, fault, We've got two faulty, one with an over temperature, the other one with an over current now. And you can see now the remaining 273 amps going into one battery, and this is far more than the BMS can handle and your set maximum charge count is. So what happens? Exactly what happened to me. All three BMS, all three batteries are turning off. We've got a fault in all three and the whole system shut down. So let's do this quickly again with the communication. Yeah, looking at this column D here, 80 amps going into the battery. We are already throttled. Yeah, we are requesting only 240 from the inverter, from the charger, but it can deliver 273. And this is a very common thing people do. They are over provisioning their solar system to what the inverter can handle, to what the BMS can take. Yeah, and this gives you the very big advantage that even in cloudy weather, you still have a very decent charging speed into your battery. So you're over provisioning, oversizing your solar panels a little bit. So this is not an uncommon setup. So here with the communication, we are clipping our maximum charge count a little bit down from 270 amps to 240 amps only. So 80 amps into each of the batteries. So middle battery has this over temperature warning or protection again. Yeah, it turns completely off. Charge MOSFETs turn off and everything. Master BMS realizes that and says, hey, I lost one of the BMS's, charge only with 160 amps. So we are still maintaining the 80 amps into the remaining batteries, bottom and top. If, for whatever reason, another battery goes out with an over temperature protection because I have plugged in this stupid temperature sensor into the circuit breaker, Master BMS realized that and said, hey, I've got only one battery left, charge only with 80 amps. Even your solar can, full power, 270 amps. Yeah, we are charging your battery with 80 amps. Everything stays safe, everything stays online. And I'm also getting the notification on the mobile phone through the Victron system. You would get a notification on your inverter, something is wrong. So now back to this argument of some, yeah, saying this is only, so communication is only necessary if you have larger systems, more advanced systems or something, yeah. What about if we introduce more batteries here? Let's say we have, what are we, six batteries. Let's say we have 7 batteries now connected, yeah, with the same 15 kilowatt solar system I have here, 7 batteries. Not uncommon for me to have 7 or even more batteries connected. Yeah, we're requesting 560 amps now from the inverter. It can deliver only 270, so it doesn't really matter. We are charging each battery with 40 amps max, totally fine, totally safe. So our battery here has got this over temperature protection again, drops out. Charging current into the remaining batteries increases by 6 amps. So that is basically nothing, yeah? With communication, without communication, makes no difference. We are far under these 100 amps we have set per BMS. Even if I fault another BMS here and another one and a fourth one as well. Very unlikely scenario. I've got 4 faulty BMSs in my system. But still, you can see with communication, 80 amps into the remaining batteries. Same as with all the batteries online. Without communication, we are still at 91 amps per BMS. Still safe under the 100 amps. So you can see the larger the system gets, the more batteries you have connected, probably the safer your system will be. And only if you have a smaller system like this with 2 batteries only and have a 15 kilowatt solar system, this would not even work without communication, because now the charger does not know about your batteries and charges full power with 270 amps into your 2 batteries, and you're already over these 136 amps. Of course, you can increase the maximum charge current per BMS, but your cables and your circuit breaker, your fuse, needs to support this as well. Yeah, don't just increase this value here because you're getting close. Ensure your cabling and everything else is as per the standard as well. And then you can increase your BMS to 150 amps and you are in the safe place again, even without communication and this size of solar system. But if we go back to 100 amps, with the communication, it doesn't matter because the BMS communicates to the inverter and say, hey, I can only charge with 160 amps maximum. You can deliver 270, but please only charge me with 160. That's 80 amps into each of the batteries, exactly as you have set it up. And then it doesn't matter if 1 or more BMSs go into fault. The communication will always ensure you are staying safe. It is like an extra layer of safety. Plus you have the big advantage that your inverter will go into an alarm or a warning and notify you on the app, or at least show a flashing light somewhere, so you know something has happened, something is not right. Alright my friends, I link this document down below as well. You can see how it works roughly, so you can put your details in there, can play a little bit around with the settings and see how your system would perform with communication, without communication. You can set the BMSs to default. You can see what happens if I connect another 2 batteries or take 2 batteries away. How would that actually influence the safety of my system? And then you have to make your own decision with communication, without communication. So I'm really keen to read about your experience, so leave your comments down below. Are you running your system with or without communication? Why do you do it like this? Do you have any stories to tell where the communication actually saved your ass? Or even the other way around, it didn't save your ass because you didn't have any communication and something happened. So write this all down in the comment section. I'm very keen to read this all, and I think many people as well. Thank you very much for that. Alright my friends, I think so far this video from today, we have tested the safety, security of the JK-Inverter BMS, connected 4 batteries in parallel, and set a couple of alarms and see how this reacts, how this comes through to the Victron system. So as we know, the charging and also alarm logic is fairly robust in the JK-Inverter BMS. As you have seen, the cabling on the outside, or if one of the BMS has a firmware issue and freezes but leaves the charge MOSFETs on, there is a bit of a safety concern with these BMSs, but I have mitigated this with the Node-RED workflow. I will share down below as well, as I said. And then we have this comparison spreadsheet here as well, where you can play around a little bit and see what the difference actually is between your system with communication, without communication. How do the currents actually then change when you have a BMS in fault, or even several BMSs in fault then? And until the next video guys, when we want to have a look at the Global Power BMS versus the JK-Inverter BMS versus the Victron Smart Shunt, because this test is running for now 3-4 weeks or so, and we want to see what the result is. Which of the 3 measurement calculations, state of charge calculations, is actually the best, the most accurate. So we are going to recharge the batteries fully next time here on this channel. Okay my friends, if you enjoy this sort of content here, drop me a like. If you are new here, subscribe, or even better, become a channel member. And some of these wonderful and very beautiful people who are becoming a channel member and donating on a regular basis here, keeping the channel independent, so I'm not reliant on any company sponsorships. And as always guys, until the next video, you stay charged, stay safe, and thanks again for watching. See you then. Bye bye.